Knock, knock. Laziness. Lays in his bed all day instead of going out and getting some work done. Imagine being married to such an idle person. I'm ashamed of the way we live, a young wife said to her idle husband. My father bought our house. My mother buys our clothes. My sister bought us food to eat. My aunt bought us our car. I am so ashamed. The idle husband rolled over in bed and said, You should be ashamed. Your two no-good brothers haven't given us a cent. I thought you might chuckle at that because Aurora in general and the church in Aurora, I think in particular, is peopled with many of us highly educated, or high achieving, high expectation people. And one of those expectations is that we should use our God-given gifts and talents and abilities, and that we should not leave our full potential unfulfilled. Whatever level of potential we have, we should fulfill it by God's grace. There's something about the idle that grates on all of us. I don't know what's worse, the idle rich or the idle poor, but it seems to bug us wherever we find it. Sometimes idleness is found in the church. Yeah, idleness can express itself in different ways. The Creator has created us with our own constellation of gifts and talents and abilities to use to produce spiritual fruit for His kingdom. And we can actually be distracted by our involvements in worldly affairs to the exclusion of our involvement in the family of faith to which God calls us to produce good fruit for the kingdom. So we must be careful not to judge others too quickly in this regard. Our text for today addresses both kinds of idleness. In one sense, our sermon today is idle talk because it's a talk about idleness. In another sense, we hope it's not idle talk as that phrase is understood as being meaningless talk. You'll have to be the final judge of that. Paul talks about idleness in a letter he wrote to the church at Thessalonica. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, we command you, brothers, to keep away from every brother who is idle and does not live according to the teaching you receive from us. What teaching is he talking about? Paul wrote 2 letters to the church at Thessalonica. Our text is from the second letter, but he is addressing a topic he had previously addressed in his first letter to them, where he gently advised, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business, and to work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent upon anyone. Idleness does not present a good witness for the church to outsiders who look and figure if faith doesn't bring out the best in a person, what's the point of getting involved with it at all? Apparently, Paul felt that it was necessary to address the topic because there were some idle people at the church at Thessalonica. In that first letter, he writes, and we urge you, brothers, to warn those who are idle. Sometimes a warning is not enough. Sometimes it works. You get the intended result, but sometimes it is not effective, and it needs a firmer backup. When Paul receives news after that first letter that some among the church did not get the point in this regard, he sends a second letter with a little more force. He tells the faithful to keep away from every brother who is idle and does not live according to the teaching you receive from us. For you yourselves know how you ought to follow our example. We were not idle when we were with you, nor did we eat anyone's food without paying for it. On the contrary, we worked night and day, laboring and toiling, so that we would not be a burden to any of you. Now, in a moment, we're going to understand what it means not to associate with the idle as a way of not enabling that behavior. For now, it is important to note Paul's example. Paul was a tent maker, which is to say that he was also an evangelist. But during the day, part of the day, he would employ his talents as a tent maker to raise a little funds to feed himself and his partners in ministry. The other part of the day, he would be gathering churches, writing letters such as these, and being busy about the work of the church. I almost hesitate to tell you all this because you might be inclined to ask Reverend Horak and I to become tent makers. But I will say Paul did not have a family to take care of, but he also understood. He said, we did this not because we do not have the right to such help, but in order to make ourselves a model for you to follow. Sometimes pastors, spiritual leaders are called to present a good example to the flock. I'm sure if Paul was here, he would be picking up a hammer and going to work camp. He would be cleaning up the parking lot after a farmer's market. He'd be volunteering for Nutcracker Sweets to schlep things up down the stairs, or maybe to be in a visible role, hawking raffle tickets or whatever, because he wants to be a good example for the flock. But if Paul's example isn't getting the point across to some people, and if his gentle warning isn't getting the point across to some people, then something firmer is needed, and he has just that in mind. For when we were with you, we gave you this rule: if a man will not work, he shall not eat. Now, this is what he means by do not associate with the idle. He means do not invite him over for dinner. He's not telling him to run him out of the church unless there's a potluck. But the point is that not to affirm, enable that kind of behavior, because they'll get the point when they get hungry enough. If a man will not work, he shall not eat. Why was Paul such a stickler on this point? We've already seen one reason: it presents a bad witness to those outside the family of faith. Number two, though, when a person is idle, they consume resources that could otherwise be used for those who have genuine needs. For widows, for example, who often were precluded from gainful employment, or orphaned children, or the church in Jerusalem where people had a good reason. They were not allowed to work. They were being persecuted. Their property was being confiscated. Resources that could go to people genuinely in need were being consumed by people who were idle. But there's another reason even beyond these two, and it's sort of summarized by that quote at the top of our bulletin by Isaac Watts. For Satan always finds some mischief still for idle hands to do. Or in modern parlance, the idle hands are the devil's workshop. Idle folks don't just neglect to do something constructive. They take that discretionary time and meddle in what other people are trying to do. Paul continues, we hear that some among you are idle. They are not busy. They are busy bodies. Now, according to the American Heritage Dictionary, a busybody is, quote, a person who meddles or pries into the affairs of others. So busy bodies are not just neglecting to do what they ought to do. They're taking that time and doing what they ought not to do. And this is really the reason why the busy are not to associate with busy bodies, because they're going to distract them away from the good works that they're trying to do. Paul alludes to habitual idlers in his letter to Timothy in this regard. Besides, he writes, they get into the habit of being idle and going about from house to house. And not only do they become idlers, but also gossips and busybodies, saying things they ought not to say. In other words, they're quick to criticize others who are seeking to do the best that they can. I'm reminded of an inscription on a tombstone in Ireland. Here rests in silent clay Miss Arabella Young, who on the 21st of May began to hold her tongue. So long as they have the breath of life in them, busybodies are busy with everything except what they ought to be doing. An anonymous writer composed a list of 10 ways to kill a church. And this list effectively describes a busybody to me. Number 1, 10 ways to effectively kill a church. Number 1, don't come. Number 2, if you do come, come late. Number 3, never accept an office. It is better to stay in the background and criticize. Nevertheless, if you get sore if you are not appointed to a committee. If you are appointed to a committee, do not attend any of the meetings. If you do attend a meeting, find fault with the work of the officers and members. 5, fifth way to effectively kill a church. If asked by the chairman to give your opinion on some matter, tell her you have nothing to say. After the meeting, tell everyone how things should have been done. Number 6, let the pastor earn his money. Let him do all the work. Number 7, never give to your church in advance. Wait until you get your money's worth and then wait a bit longer. Well, stewardship campaign is continuing on. Okay. Number 8, eighth way to kill a church. Never encourage the pastor. If you like a sermon, keep mum about it. Many a pastor has been ruined by flattery. And I'm telling you, these cards you have sent during pastor appreciation, not helpful. And this cake that we're going to have after this service, not good. You can ruin pastors that way. Number 9, it is good to tell your pastor's failings to any strangers who may happen in. They might be a long time finding them out themselves otherwise. Number 10, if there happen to be a few zealous workers in church, make a tremendous protest against the church by being run by just a few chosen people. Okay. All right, one of the reasons why the church in Aurora is one of the longest continuing congregations in the state of Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana, which comprise the Northwest Territory. And the first settlement in the Northwest Territory was down in Marietta. You know, if somebody here knows how, does anybody here can edit Wikipedia? They give you an option. I'm not qualified. Come on. I need you to help out. I need you to go there and edit under oldest churches in America. They'll list them by state. And in Ohio, there's a handful of states that are listed whose churches, all of them, no earlier than 1810. Now, the church in Aurora got in just under the wire and was gathered at the end of 1809. That should be in Wikipedia. I don't know why it's not. One of the reasons why the church in Aurora has been one of the longest continuing congregations is because it hasn't been killed off by these behaviors. Quite to the contrary, other behaviors have become normative here, and congratulations to you for that. Paul writes in concluding, never tire in doing what is right. Neither neglect righteousness because of laziness, nor of distracting ourselves from what we ought to be doing by what we ought not to be doing. Because if we will not work for the kingdom here, we should not expect to eat at the banquet in the kingdom of heaven hereafter. And those are not idle words. Please rise.